All right, we'll go ahead and call this meeting into session at this time. And as we move down through the agenda, there'll be a couple of changes. So let me go ahead and give those changes to the agenda. We've added item 4.1 CACI task order number 2-112 for installation of network and communication equipment for 2 new portable buildings at Antioch Elementary School. We've added item 4.2 CACI task order number 2-113 for installation of network and communication equipment for 1 new portable building at Ruckle Middle School. We've added item 4.3 CACI task order number 2-114 for installation of network and communication equipment for 1 new portable building at Davidson Middle School. And we've added item 4.4 CACI task order number 2-115 for installation of network and communication equipment for 1 new portable building at Lewis School. So at this juncture, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker, second by Ms. Thrush. All in favor, let's vote. Votes 5-0. All right, moving down to public hearings. 3.1, public hearing for the adoption of revised school board policy 01-06, personal appearance before the school board, presented by Mr. Jeff McInnes, attorney to the board, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. So I'll go ahead and call that public hearing into session. Is there anyone here to comment on this particular matter tonight? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing
real quick.
Sure, Mr.
On this particular policy. Now, will they be speaking? This will be after we do go through all of the agenda items, and this will be at the very end of it. Correct?
What we provided for is that there will be 2 opportunities. One will occur at some point before the consent agenda, and one will occur at some point after the discussion agenda, but we tried to leave some flexibility to the board exactly where you place those.
Any further discussion or comments or question? All right, hearing and seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, 3.2, public hearing for the adoption of revised school board policy chapter 4 students, presented by Mrs. Terry Schroeder, Program Director, Student Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here tonight to speak to this policy? Seeing none, looking for a motion. Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, since there's none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, 3.3, public hearing for adoption of revised school board policy 12-02, transported students, presented by Mr. J. McInnes, Program Director of Transportation, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here to speak to this policy tonight? Seeing none?
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bryant.
I think you got it.
Yes, sir. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, 3.4, public hearing for the adoption of elementary and secondary code of student conduct for the 2018-2019 school year, presented by Mr. Andy Johnson, Specialist, Student Intervention Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here to speak to this matter tonight?
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, so I'm going to close out the public hearings and reconvene the regular schedule. And so now we are at 3.5, required local effort millage rate, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And Mr. Chairman, we will take public comment on each one of these items as we go through as well, so
Sure.
we're in a public hearing session for those.
All right, so we'll go in recess and go into public hearing, Is there any public comment regarding the local effort millage rate?
And if you'd allow me to read them out as
Yes,
you're ready.
Mr. McInnes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
The required local effort millage rate, the tentative millage levy is proposed at 4.1130 mils.
So this is an action item,
Yes, sir.
and I see no public comment.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Ms. Thrush. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, 3.6, basic discretionary operating millage rate, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Mr.
Mr. Chairman, the
McInnes?
basic discretionary millage rate, tentative millage levy, 0.7480 mils.
Is there anyone here to speak to this one tonight? Seeing
Move it.
none. Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Ms. Thrush. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. All right, 3.7, capital outlay millage rate, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Chairman, the capital outlay millage, tentative millage levy is proposed at 1.5000 mils.
Okay. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Ms. Thrush. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, 3.8, total millage levy, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And the total millage levy, tentative millage levy rate proposed at 6.3610 mils.
Anyone here to speak to that? Seeing none, need a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion?
I'd just like
Yes, ma'am.
to
Sure.
say to all the people hopefully watching that this is your lowest total millage rate in 28 years. So if you go back just to the 2004-2005 year, for example, your millage rate was 8.294 mils. Unlike your county commissioners, this school board cannot increase your millage rate without you, the voter, approving that and voting for an additional ad valorem millage. Your millage rate is set by the legislature, so we have just moved our required local effort, our capital outlay, and in the documentation that is provided on the finance website, you can see the 28-year history. And so while the value of your property, if you reside in Okaloosa County, might have increased, your millage rate has continued to go down for 28 years.
All right, anything else?
Nope.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thrush. All right, any further discussion? All right, need a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker. We already got that, didn't we? Sorry. All right, no more discussion, so let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. All right, 3.9, Resolution 18-04, adopting the tentative millage rate for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it. Or are you going to read it?
Public comment.
Okay, is there any public comment?
Move it.
Seeing none, motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Ms. Thrush. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. 3.10, preliminary and tentative budget for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Is there anyone here to speak to this one?
Mr. Chairman, I need, if you will, I need to
Sure.
read each category of this for you, and
Sure.
we need to take separate votes under this agenda item.
All right, so you want to do them one at a time then as you go through?
Yes, sir.
And,
All right.
Before we get started on that, Mr. Chairman and Attorney and Ms. Scallion may need to answer this, but I plan to make a motion tonight on a particular subject. However, to make sure that we have to do it the correct way, so that we have to approve this preliminary budget tonight more or less as is because of the way it's been advertised. However, I need advice of knowing if I wish to make a change in the budget after the preliminary is voted on, because of the fact that we've advertised it this way. We need to pass the budget as it's been advertised. But before we do the final budget, I wish to either make the motion tonight, because naturally if a motion fails, then it becomes a moot point anyway. But if two other board members agree with me and we do look at then having to change the budget, that it's now preliminary there, then I'd like advice of how that needs to be handled. And either Ms. Gallion or whoever would, I need some leadership, Mr. Chairman, from how would be
Sure.
the best way to handle that.
Superintendent, Ms. Scallon came forward.
Okay, the preliminary and tentative budget, the best, if you were going to make any changes, additions, deletions, or modifications, to make them after you've adopted the preliminary and tentative budget, so it does match the advertisement that was advertised on Friday. Overall, even if you make an adjustment, overall your budget is not going to change in total. It may change between categories if you're going to change it, and when I say categories, I'm talking about objects, but overall the budget will not change, because the amount of revenue and fund balance that we have is what we have. Now, of course, there'll be some additional miscellaneous revenue by the time we get to the final, but any change that you would vote to do would be incorporated into the final budget.
Okay. So, if I understood you correctly, then, Mr. McInnes, you jump in here. We're moving forward the preliminary and tentative budget, although there could be a change to that.
After that's been adopted, then
After it's been adopted.
Of course, up to the board what you do for the final budget.
Does that help, Mr. Walker? Clarify for you? Is there anything else you
Well,
want?
what I'd like to know would be the proposal that I wish to change after the preliminary budget. Do we need to do that tonight? In other words, what I'm saying, let's say the proposal I make, if two other board members or the entire board doesn't agree with me, it's a moot point. So what I'm saying is after we pass the preliminary budget, then I need to turn around and make a motion of what I plan to propose to not be in the final budget. Am I making sense?
That's my understanding. Is that correct?
If two other board members agree with me, then we know that the superintendent and her staff will be getting with Rita to make changes. Is that making sense? So I need to know, do we wait till another board meeting to do this, or do we do it tonight after? Because we definitely want to approve the preliminary budget because of how it's been advertised. But after we do that, do we then want to deal with another board member or anybody else wishes to then make a change or recommend a change? Naturally, if it don't pass by majority of the board, then it becomes moot anyway. But if it does pass, then our instruction will be for the superintendent and the Ms. Gallion would get together and then come back and provide information to us that we would have for the final budget, which would then be final. And what I need now, do we need to do it tonight, or we need to do it at the next whatever?
Which is preferable to you, as you're the finance person?
And for me, it does not matter.
Right.
We can do it. If there's a change, it just needs to be a vote of the board that directs a change to the budget. So whether you do it after you adopt the preliminary and tentative today, or you do it at another board meeting, it's entirely up to you.
I see. That answer your question?
It makes no difference to me how you as the chairman wish to address that, simply because I want to make sure, though, that then if a change is made after the preliminary budget, it gives Ms. Scallion her time to then alter the budget before we vote for the final budget.
This meeting or next board meeting?
It makes no
Reference
difference.
At
doesn't
the
matter.
pleasure of the
Makes no
school board,
difference to me.
because you're
I'll
not,
leave that up to you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
you would not see a change in the budget
All right,
until
then.
it came back as the final budget on September the 11th.
All right, so let's approach it this way then. Let's go ahead and, do we have a motion, Jan, on 3.10 yet?
Well, we need to go line.
You go one by one?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's talk about that then. So let's do that one by one.
Yes, sir.
And then I guess at the end of the public hearings, Mr. Walker could then, if he chose to tonight, bring forth his change.
Yes, sir. I'd certainly recommend that you finish items 3.10 and 3.11.
Got it.
And then if there's other board action after that,
Got it.
those are then
Separate.
taken care of.
Okay, sir. Go ahead.
In regard to the district budget, the general fund, the tentative budget general fund is $313,336,659.25.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, Mr. McInnes, you require a separate motion,
Yes,
I
sir.
understand. Looking for a motion, board members.
Move
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Hearing or seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0.
The second element of the proposed district budget is special revenue funds food service. That amount is $17,058,319.48.
All right, sir. Is there any public input? Seeing none, need a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0.
The next element of the tentative budget is special revenue funds, federal programs. The amount is $15,926,134.22.
Any public comment?
Move
Seeing
it.
none, motion by Mr. Walker,
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0.
The next element of the tentative budget is debt service fund at $8,494,640.23.
Any public comment? Need a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryant. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0.
The next element of the tentative budget is capital project funds at $37,997,767.02.
Any public input? Need a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0.
So, Mr. Chairman, then for item 310, combined, the total district summary budget and the tentative budget is $392,813,520.20.
Any public input? Need a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mr. Destin. Any discussion?
I would
Sure.
just, again, for those watching, in this document that's attached to this agenda item, on page 21, it lists the gross taxable value of property, and it, again, shows a change in that gross taxable value. And that's because, as I stated previously, that people's property value has increased and not their millage rate. But I also pulled up last year's revenue, and I think I've mentioned previously how, because a majority of land in Okaloosa County is owned by the federal government, and therefore we do not receive property tax funds. On page 21 of the booklet that board members have, and on page 22 of the document that's attached to this agenda item, it lists that last year's gross taxable value was $17,538,866,021, which is a lot of money. But to put things in perspective, Walton County for the same year had over approximately $1 billion more in gross taxable value of property. And that is again, a sizable amount of money, but their school district is about the third of our size. And also St. Johns County for last year had approximately $8 billion more in gross taxable value of property. So just so that the general public understands, in addition to our millage rates being the lowest they've been in 28 years, and while certainly as a real estate market returns in our area and across the state, our gross taxable value of property is still below what it was in 2007 here in Okaloosa County. Meanwhile, we have an increased enrollment and, of course, increase in costs across the board and new mandates. So I just wanted to put that in perspective for those watching.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Thrush. Anything else, board members? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0.
Then you have item 3.11, Mr. Chairman. This is Resolution 1805. It's a resolution of the Okaloosa County School Board adopting the tentative budget for fiscal year 2018-2019.
All right, so we need a motion.
Move it.
Any public?
Public hearing first.
Yes, sir.
Any public input? Now we need a motion.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Ms. Thrush. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Votes 5-0. All right, Mr. Attorney, I think that takes us through all those different items. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so now we're at the juncture, Mr. Walker, where if you choose to, you can bring the item forward now, or you can wait until next meeting.
Well, I'd like to, and I think I discussed it at the department budgets, is I'd like to recommend that if the majority of the board agrees with me, that Ms. Jackson and her staff must look at the community service department to be defunded and moved, and suggestion that the superintendent come up with some kind of new plan to handle the foundation and all those particular activities, because I think if you look at the foundation, it's been totally bankrupt. There's been virtually no direct funds raised by it, and I'd just like for the superintendent to look at possibly restructure. And I think that if we look at many of the duties that some of the people has now left that department that was doing it at a very nominal fee, and I just believe that the superintendent will restructure and look at it and maybe reassign duties to other departments or wherever, however, how she wishes to choose it. But I think that when you look at the budget that we had last year, when you looked at the district's contribution just directly to the foundation was almost $50,000. But I just think that the duties that's being done under that particular department could be handled under some type of contracted services, or either found a much better and more efficient way to do those services. And I'd like to make a motion to that effect, that the superintendent, between now and when we would do a final budget, that she would come back making some recommendations that I feel like definitely needs to be made. If you look at how that particular foundation is being run and the work that has not been done in it, I feel like it definitely needs to be changed, and that's my reason for recommending that we defund it and restructure, and that's my motion.
I think if and let me clarify, the recommendation is asked, the motion is asked the superintendent for a recommendation on restructure, correct?
Right, correct.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Walker, second by Mr. Destin. So, Superintendent, I certainly will honor you if you have any comment. But first, I'll ask board members, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, I have a question to
Okay.
Mr. McGinnis, and I think this came up at our last meeting when Mr. Walker brought this up. You know, with all due respect to Mr. Walker, the board unanimously approved the administrative and managerial staffing as recommended by the superintendent. So we have approved positions and people for those positions And if I understand Mr. Walker's motion this evening, we essentially would be defunding that department. So what are our obligations to employees that we have already offered contracts and that this board already approved contracts for? If we go forward with Mr. Walker's motion to defund this department?
I think the first thing, Ms. Thrush, we have to separate tonight's action would be an issue of funding a department. This is not an action on an individual person or employee. As I stated earlier, there are contract obligations in place that would have to be dealt with separate and apart from the actual department budget. So my suggestion is that we try to keep those issues separated. You're not voting tonight on anyone's contract or anything like that. You're voting on a department budget. It would then fall back to the superintendent to work with finance and deal with any contractual obligations that are out there. But this vote tonight is a budget vote on a department.
Chairman, if I may qualify, since I was a second on the motion, my second was not to defund the department. My second is to have the superintendent look at it, come back to us and tell us if there's a way that we can do it more efficiently and save some money. Because if we can, then I have a particular place I would like that saved money to go in this budget. And based on what she can do, then I would make a motion later on what we can do with that.
All right.
That save money, but it's not to defund the department.
So is that?
Ms. Thrush, I hope I've answered the question. I mean, there's two different matters here. This, if you voted on that, you're not impacting any contract because those have been approved.
Well, first of all, I'm not convinced that we have a second now.
Right.
So we need to resolve that.
I'm hearing
Mr.
a
McInnes.
distinction between the motion and the second.
Well, I think, and that's why I clarified at the end that Mr. Walker's motion was to ask the superintendent to bring us back recommendations on the department.
But it included defunding.
Completely
Well,
defunding?
And I'm hoping, you know, hey, all I know is if any of you board members is honest with me tonight, you know that the foundation has been a disaster. And we need to fix it if we're going to stay in the foundation business. And I'm hoping the superintendent can come back with some recommendations that will show me that this will happen. And I'm not getting into people, personnel, or nothing.
Right.
It just needs to be fixed. And I mean, the people that served on the foundation board that have came to me and personally said how terrible it's been, and we need to address that. And that's all I'm trying to get us to do.
I understand. I just want to make sure that we get the parliamentary part right.
Exactly. And I'm not getting into nobody's contract or nothing at this time.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I guess where I'm at, Mr. Destin, is trying to understand if your second stands or if Mr. Walker is modifying his motion to withdraw the defunding part.
I would think that he is.
Well, I mean, and you know, I don't do a real good job sometimes, but like I said, I'm hoping that when we end up, it's going to be a different type of funding and a different way to present the services we've been presenting. But on the other hand, truthfully, if somebody convinces me that there's going to be a way to make it work and it's going to be better, I may go along with putting more money in it. I don't know. I mean, we want to fix this problem that's a serious problem.
I understand. So, Mr. Attorney, I'm looking for clarification
I guess for the
on the
clarification
motion.
on the record, Mr. Walker, is your motion to ask the superintendent to bring back recommendations regarding the structure of that department, or is your motion to defund the department?
Well, at this point in time, it would be where she would come back to this board with suggestions that would show me that we plan to restructure and do something different to make it work better, or either let's get out of if we reach a point to where I would then recommend we get out of the foundation business. But at this time, I'm giving the superintendent an opportunity to come back and show me as a board member that I think that we ought to do something to change the way it's being run, and whatever that takes, that's going to be up to the superintendent. That's not the board's place.
So your motion is not, your motion tonight is not, your motion is not moving any money at this point. It's just asking.
The defunding actually would come later if I'm not convinced.
All right, and
that's what I.
So your second stands then.
All right,
and I guess if what you said that pending whatever the outcome may
Right.
be of this
The
motion,
zone of the
you
temp-
could then go to
And there you go.
defunding. All right,
Exactly right.
all right then. If you got a second, I understand. All right then, so now I understand. We have a motion for the superintendent to bring back some reorganization of community affairs, I guess, and the foundation. Is that what I understand?
That's correct.
And we have a second. So any further discussion, board members?
Well, again, I would like to disagree with some of Mr. Walker's statements. Just as a board member who served on the foundation board, I think we need to be clear that there's a distinction between the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation and the Community Affairs Department. They're two distinct entities. I would not ever describe the foundation as a disaster.
No.
That is a disservice to the volunteers who serve on the board and to the volunteers who serve as mentors and to current and former staff. I do understand Mr. Walker's concerns about the foundation and its financial status. And I did share my concerns with the superintendent prior to my voting on the administrative and managerial staffing. And again, I think that would have been more appropriate to request prior to approving that staffing, a reorganization of that department. That being said, you know, I'm open to have further discussions with the superintendent, district staff, and in a public setting with other board members. I just hope that in the future we can make distinctions between community affairs and the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation, and that we don't discredit the years of service that many volunteers and staff have diligently performed to the benefit of many students that have been served by the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation.
Okay. Anybody else have any comment?
I would.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. I would support her separating the two
Sure.
entities, and her praise for the foundation. But and the discussion you had, I appreciate that with the superintendent during the staffing. But I don't recall that at a public meeting. Was that? Did we have a public discussion on that?
No.
And that's the problem we continue to run into, is we seem to be making decisions based on private conversations rather than having the kind of public forum that we should.
But it didn't come up. I mean, I don't want to interrupt, but
Yep.
to me, we should have had that discussion when
Yes.
we vote, we make a motion and a second, and prior to
I couldn't-
voting on
couldn't
the
agree more.
I agree. But yes, I did voice my concerns and share my concerns with the superintendent, and was satisfied with some of the measures that she answered my concerns with. But as you stated, I'm not allowed to share those with you except in a
At the
public
public meeting,
setting,
right.
and unless somebody else mentions in a public setting that they have concerns, I don't know.
I understand.
Well, you know, the thing we need to do as quickly as we can vote, because all of this
I have
will be a
something to
moot
say.
point if we don't, three hands come up. If three hands come up, then we'll deal with all the other concerns.
Sure.
Huh?
All right. And I'll recognize you, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. I have a huge problem with this. I think this is somewhat underhanded to not bring this up when it should have been brought up with those employees. We now have 2 employees. And when you say it's a disaster, you're not looking at the same financial report I'm looking at that Rita just gave me. It is not a disaster. When you look at the grants that have been earned there, and you look at the money and the revenue that has been brought in this year, no, it's not a disaster. And just because 1 or 2 people come to you and tell you it's a disaster, that's no reason to assume that it is. And frankly, and I'm going to say it, I feel that this move is targeting a single employee, and I think it's wrong. I think that this should not happen. We have a little more integrity than this. If you had just said, no, we're not going to fund those positions, that would have been that. But the way we're doing it is very wrong, and I'm just sickened by this approach, and that's all I'm going to say.
I understand, Ms. Jackson. So the document you have there,
Yes.
it may be something that we've already
Rita,
received.
did Rita give this to all of you?
Have we all received that
You
document?
asked for it.
I did.
And
That's
she
right.
brought it tonight to give to
Okay.
you.
Please do so. We certainly wouldn't want the superintendent to have something we don't have.
I wouldn't want you to. She just handed it to me out there and said she was
I
going to give it to
understand.
y'all.
I understand.
I think Dr. White, what you requested.
Yes, I did.
The revenue.
Right.
So this is what this
Right.
reflects, is the different components of revenue.
And so I'm not sure how to address the targeting part and all those things.
Well, that is my opinion.
I understand.
I know that several of you have not wanted a certain employee back, and this is a way to get rid of them.
Well, I'd rather
and
not,
I don't like
I'd
it.
rather not deal with individuals or so forth.
That's what we're
Well,
doing.
I hear what you're saying, Superintendent, but I think on the advice of council that the motion concerned a department. And I'm certainly sensitive to the other board members' comments about that as well. However, I guess the thing that for me, should this motion carry, it might be that you would come back and say, everything's fine, the way we're doing it.
And I would say one other thing. I did meet with the board of this organization, and I recommended to them at the time, if they weren't going to work and raise money,
That's right.
to send it to the college.
I remember that.
And they were adamant that they
Right.
did not want anything to happen to the
Right.
Public School Foundation. They wanted to continue forward. They sat down, worked out a plan with the executive director and all of them of what they are going to do this next year. Listen, this was in way worse shape. I was on there. I was in there. We couldn't raise a nickel.
Well-
We couldn't get 3 people to come to a meeting. I sat through a bunch of them.
And I think Mr. Bryant's on there with you as well. Is that
He
correct,
is.
Mr. Bryant? You're on
He
that
is.
foundation too.
I am.
But we brought that up and we said, look, if y'all aren't going to work and y'all aren't going to help us raise money, then let's send it to Northwest Florida State College. Let them take over the Take Stock program. I said, that's the solution to your problem. No, we want to raise money. We want to do it right. Don't do this. Don't do this. And so I said, okay,
Right.
we got one more year.
Well, and again, should the motion carry, it may not, but should it carry, that might be part of your recommendation back to the board. But I don't know that you may choose to make drastic and dramatic changes, or you may choose to say, everything's fine and here's the proof.
I don't, there it is.
Right. So.
And this doesn't even have the grant that foundation worked on for out at Silver Sands to get their
Right,
greenhouse.
that was on the news. Right.
That was all done through the foundation.
So,
And that was $120,000.
sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
Rita has it listed under specific purpose grants.
Okay.
And I would just, recommend that board members look through here. I mean, again, we have programs that are scheduled for the upcoming school year under other restricted purposes, the United Way grant, that helps provide transportation to our elementary students who participate in the Carnegie Hall Link Up program.
Yes.
With the Northwest Florida Symphony Orchestra. Many of our teachers are relying on the grants provided through AT&T and Boeing for equipment and programs that they're using in their courses this year. And, as Mr. McGinnis alluded to, maybe this department discussion, I'm sure the superintendent would have somebody quickly manage these grants, but it does present an issue if at this juncture we decide to change the path without a more methodical approach with some time considerations. And I think that's what is missing.
Okay, Mr. Bryant, you have anything? You're on that board if you've got any
Yeah,
input.
I would just concur with Ms. Jackson said. I wasn't at that meeting personally. I was on the phone, and I mean, like Ms. Thrush alluded there, we got many people who are volunteering to be a part of that
Yes.
that program. And myself, I'm a mentor. Went out Saturday with Cram the Van, so I mean, I see the good things that are going on here. But I don't personally think that those people wanted to see it go away.
I know
they
they
want to
did.
see it be successful. So, but I will concur what she said, that she basically told them, we got it. Let's get it done. So.
It's not one person's responsibility. It's the responsibility of that board. And, they don't want it to go away. And in fact, we have more members on that board than we have had in 10, 12, 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
Active members in the community.
And having had some experience with
Yes.
volunteer organizations, I understand it's a different kind of thing to work with and deal with.
And I made it clear,
Right.
Right. Things better change.
So I guess in one sense, that is a kind of reorganization.
Well, it
But
is.
that's just my opinion. So is there any other discussion by board members before we vote on the motion?
I have one small
Sure.
bit.
Sure.
And for the record, this is not about somebody's job. This is about us doing a more efficient job and saving money. To the best of my knowledge, we don't pay anybody on the foundation. This isn't about the foundation, yet this department budget is, Rita, 200,000. How much is the department budget? Foundation people are not being paid.
And as I mentioned, I think at the budget workshop, this budget is for community affairs, and it is the total budget is about $210,000. However, the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation support is only one component of the function of that department. That department also oversees the mentoring program, oversees the volunteer program. So there's multiple pieces that are a function of that department. So that department doesn't exist just for the Okaloosa
No.
Public Schools Foundation.
And I understand that. What I
Okay.
would like to see is if we can do it in a more cost-efficient manner.
And so then the fallback to that remark would be that that's what you'd be looking for the superintendent to say, is there a way we can do this more cost
That's
efficient
exactly what I'm looking for.
by combining services, or maybe you've already done that?
We have. And he has had to pick up all of the duties that Dort was doing. All of those are his duties now. And there's a lot of them. Now, this is the thing. If we're looking for cost-saving measures, I can bring you several. You may not like them, but I can bring them.
Well, no, I don't think we'll like them. Most of us, we don't like having to cut. We
I'm
like to
just
add.
telling you, I can
understand.
certainly bring
I
them.
understand. And sadly, we are probably approaching that condition
We are.
financially.
Why do you think Marcus Chambers is doing what he's doing? It's not because we have $1 billion laying out there. It's because we're trying to be efficient. But there are some other things at the district level that we could do that would save you some money.
All right. Well, let's try to focus on the parliamentary aspect of this.
Okay.
And so the motion is regarding Mr. Walker's motion, and a second by Mr. Destin. Is there any further discussion to ask the superintendent to come back with a plan, if you will, or how we might modify how we're doing business? And I think we've heard some of that tonight. Is that right?
And they were extremely happy with what we're doing.
All right, So
and have been working hard on this.
Do I understand the motion correctly?
I think so.
All right.
Can you
Sure.
just explain, Superintendent, I know you and Mr. Bryant alluded to a discussion that you had with the board and that you do have a plan. And I mean, I hate to put you on the spot now, but prior to voting, can you kind of elaborate
Yes.
what changes you have made either to the executive director position as far as accountability measures, or as far as a revenue generating proposal from the foundation
Yes.
aspect?
Yes. I'll start initially with the changes that have made to the executive director. I think we've added 6 or 7 specific stipulations. One, that he will be in every school raising money for the foundation this year. He has a goal that he has to meet with every school to be able to generate more funds. He has been charged with being at every single chamber meeting, and let me tell you, that's a job, and I don't have time to do it, to raise revenue and talk to people about the foundation. When you just stop and think about the volunteers themselves, that is almost a full-time job.
Well, I know
It's
Eric
huge.
Mitchell could tell us since he's switching over to a new software program.
It's a huge job. Then he has to manage, that position has to manage the other staff that are there. They are responsible for Cram the Van, which they've spent the last 4 weekends doing, or 3 weekends, whatever it is. Marcus, can you remember any of the others? All the grants. He's responsible for writing every single one of these grants. Every one of them. And you don't just sit down and whip out a grant in a day. He is responsible for doing all of that. He is our military liaison with the military. Just had some interaction with he and the new person out at Eglin today. It isn't just about the foundation.
Well, that's the part that ties into community affairs.
Yes,
that-
and there's
that's
a
where
lot of
sometimes-
it.
Sometimes it gets a little, I don't want to use the word nebulous, but it gets
Yes.
commingled.
Yes, it does. And I think that I had a heart-to-heart with those board members, a heart-to-heart. And I told them. And you asked me another question.
Well, just what are some revenue generating ideas? I mean, again, I think for the public to understand, we have many fine organizations and businesses in our
Yes.
community that are extremely supportive of the school district and of numerous organizations within our county. And so I know when I served on the board, there were discussions of having an annual event, an annual fundraising event. And the issue becomes, when to
Correct.
have it, the type of
Correct.
event, and it's
Correct.
very difficult to create something that's unique to support just the foundation that already isn't being done. We have very, numerous, and we're also under certain restrictions as far as it being a school-related organization. And so
Yes.
that kind of limits opportunities for fundraising in itself.
It limits it a lot.
Right. And so I guess in your heart-to-heart with the board, did you discuss some out-of-the-box ideas for fundraising?
Basically, I think the point is we've challenged the director to get in the schools and get money. Because if every teacher in this district would give $1 a month, that would be $1,800 a month coming in to the foundation. We've never done that before. And that's what we're going to do. And then Linda Sumblin, Bob Bennett, I can't remember the other one, they met with the director and they said, okay, this is what needs to happen. But the truth of the matter is, and they even admitted it in the meeting we had at Mr. Bennett's bank, well, we haven't exactly been doing, what we're supposed to be doing. he can only lead them to the trough, but he can't make them drink the water. And because it is a volunteer organization. And I'll tell you, there would be some upset people if you did away with the Public School Foundation. But I'm telling you, it's way better off than it was when I was sitting in there over in that little building at Lowry.
Well, and again, I think the current members and previous members have done a great job, and I will attest that attendance was steady and regular when I served on the board, and I think a lot of creative ideas did come. We had the people that you just mentioned, along with the executive director, worked on kind of mobile units that we could go out to our high schools and help give added benefit to some high school students who might not have thought college was an option for them, and give them some career training tips, resume writing, and that we had some students get in very successfully to some colleges based on the programs that they started. I know they implemented it up in the North End and at Fort Walton. It was very successful. So
That's my take on it, so I'm going to hush.
Well, it sounds like you've got it framed up. I don't know if it's been sketched out literally item by item yet, and that certainly would be something that I'd be interested in seeing.
And those things that I mentioned have been added as an addendum to that individual's contract.
Okay. And, when you get into personnel things, knowing just a little bit about that, I can't help but fathom whether or not the job description is sufficient to cover those items.
Probably not.
Okay.
But we used the old one that Mr. Gates, I think.
Okay, so maybe we'll be bringing forward some revision in job description, and certainly should that be the case, that again would, in my mind, be part of some kind of, for lack of a better word, I'll use Mr. Walker's word, reorganization of how we're doing this. So is there any other questions or comments from board members?
Well, then, I'm kind of stirred this hornet's nest. I'd just like to say one little simple statement.
Sure.
Hey, if everything's so wonderful, we fixing to simplify this. I didn't realize it was the greatest thing in the world. And all I'm ready to do is let's vote. If 3 hands come up, then I think that you've been very clear of what needs to happen. If they doesn't, then it's all, and I love everybody after it's over with, so there's no problem, but let's just vote, because everybody else is talked to death, and I'm the one that's not really had very much to say. But I'm not mad with anybody. I've not mentioned any individual's names. I swear that I've not deliberately tried to take somebody's job or anything. My whole purpose is, Mr. Destin probably explained it better for me than I explained it myself. All I'd like for us to do is vote, and if we don't have 3 hands come up, everything stays the same and everything's wonderful. If with 3 hands come up, then I think that you've been very clear of what we would like to see happen. And if it turns out wonderful, great, but let's vote.
Okay. Well, I'm ready to vote if y'all are. All right, so all in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All opposed? All right, the vote carries 3-2.
Not surprised.
Okay. And so what that really means is we're just looking for a design that comes back. Okay?
And you did a good job of explaining that.
Well, okay. All right, so now moving down, we have section 4. These are the items that we added to the agenda. 4.1, CACI task order number 2-112 for installation of network and communication equipment for 2 new portable buildings at Antioch Elementary School, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
second.
I think
Mr.
Ms.
Dustin.
Thrush.
Ms. Rush had it.
Yep, Ms. Thrush, the second. Any discussion?
Just real quick.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mitchell, how long will this take to get these done? And this will answer all 4 of them here that we're going to go down. I know we have until the 13th, so
That's exactly right. That's the way we see it. We have until the 13th. And so we have every intent and plan to get these done as soon as possible, and that's why we're very thankful that this is on tonight's agenda, and we hope that this will be done by the start of school. I can't guarantee it. We don't know what the weather's going to be. It's a rainy week. But with the passage of this tonight, they will start tomorrow.
Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Anything else? Let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0. 4.2, CACI Task Order Number 2-113 for installation of network and communication equipment for one new portable building at Ruckle Middle School, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist, Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Ms. Thrush. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? The vote's 5-0. 4.3, CACI Task Order Number 2-114 for installation, network, and communication equipment for one new portable building at Davidson Middle School, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist, Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dustin. Any discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? Vote carries 5-0. 4.4, CACI Task Order Number 2-115 for installation of network and communication equipment for one new portable building at Lewis School, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist, Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent.
Move it.
Motion by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Mr. Dustin. Any discussion? Let's vote. Vote carries 5-0. All right, so now I'm going to just quickly ask, is there anything else we need to cover, Mr. McInnes, that you can think of?
No, sir.
All right. All right, we're good. Meeting is adjourned.
Be careful going.